Dr. Aletha Marie Harven. You can call me Dr. Harven, and I would like to welcome everyone to the fourth season and my fourth year of my live webinar series, Transformative Conversations Promoting Equity and Inclusion in Education and Beyond. So to kick off my fourth season, I am here with a very special guest, Dr. Cornel West. Hi, Dr. West.
I am so very blessed to be here, and I salute you, my dear sister, Professor Aletha Harven, straight out of Sacramento. That's my
Yeah.
town, so you my home sister and my home girl, too, and salute your precious parents, Ella
Aw.
and Al.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. And I'm just so happy to have you here. We are going to have such an amazing conversation today.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I'd like to thank our wonderful audience for joining us today. Um, yeah, we're going to have a great conversation, and we are going to discuss your journey in serving and loving people. So I'm excited about that. Okay. So, as many of you know, Dr. West is a public intellectual, a distinguished philosopher and scholar, a political activist, and he's running for President of the United States as an independent. And I definitely want to get to that today. There's a lot to discuss, Dr. West. But first, I would like to give you a proper introduction by reading a brief bio about you, which I do for all of my guests. And after that, I would like to take a journey through your life by focusing on your childhood, talking about your college years, being a professor, and of course, your presidential bid. And I definitely am going to explore how you speak truth to power, because that's super fascinating to me. Okay. So here is my introduction of Dr. West. Dr. Cornel West is affectionately known to many as Brother West. Hey, brother.
Oh, my dear sister.
He is the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Chair at Union Theological Seminary. Dr. West teaches on the works of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, as well as courses in philosophy of religion, African American critical thought, and other subjects, including the classics such as philosophy, politics, cultural theory, literature, and music. Brother West works to keep alive the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a legacy of telling the truth and bearing witness to love and justice. Dr. West, when I was at the American Educational Research Association's conference this past April, you definitely talked about witnessing, being a witness, I should say, to love and justice, and you really held everyone's feet to the fire, and I appreciated that. It was such a good presentation.
Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you so very much.
Dr. West is the former professor of the practice of public philosophy at Harvard University and professor emeritus at Princeton University. Brother West graduated magna cum laude from Harvard in 3 years and obtained his master's and Ph.D. in philosophy at Princeton University. Dr. West has written 20 books and has edited 13. He is best known for his classics, Race Matters and Democracy Matters, and for his memoir, Brother West, Living and Loving Out Loud. Dr. West has partnered with masterclass.com, which is absolutely amazing, to provide teachings on several influential courses, including a course with Pharrell Williams on empathy. His most recent book, Black Prophetic Fire, offers an unflinching look at 19th and 20th century African American leaders and their visionary legacies. And to continue with what I was saying about Masterclass, you are teaching Masterclass's first ever multi-instructor class on Black history, Black freedom, and Black love. And of course, your standalone class on philosophy, which is really amazing. Again, I'm so happy to have you here with me today, Dr. West.
It is my blessing. It is my real joy to be in conversation with you, very much
Yes.
so. And California State University Stanislaus is very blessed to have you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. So,
Yes.
yes, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time to my program, I am a professor at California State University Stanislaus, and I am the creator and host of this wonderful series. And you should keep up with the series because I always have amazing speakers. And of course, I'm speaking with an amazing, amazing scholar today. Okay, so Dr. West, as you know, we are focused on your journey in serving and loving people, so I thought we could start with discussing your childhood. I think that's always really important to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, so my first question is, what was life like for you during your childhood? And this question is really important to me because of my expertise in child and adolescent development and understanding that our experiences early in life often impact our experiences later in life. And so I was hoping that you could talk about where you grew up, if you could talk about your family structure, your family life, your surroundings, so your neighborhood, what you saw, what you heard, because all of those factors, they, they shape us, right? And I'm sure those different factors have shaped you in a lot of different ways.
Oh, you were so very, very right. I am first and foremost my mama's child and daddy's kid. Irene B. West, Clifton Lincoln West Jr. That's mom and dad. I'll never be 1/3 of the human being that they were. They both have passed now. But I am who I am because they loved me and they shaped me and they molded me. Now, I grew up in Glen Elder, which is south side of Sacramento, the chocolate side of Sacramento, and so the West household of my older brother Clifton, who was just beyond measure in terms of his love for me, just like mom and dad, and Cynthia and Cheryl, their love for me and our love for each other. So we had a natural, supernatural love. We had a human, divine love all mixed up. The West household was inseparable from Shiloh Baptist Church. That's in Oak Park, right on 9th Avenue in Sacramento. Reverend Willie P. Cook, right out of Brookhaven, Mississippi. I've never had a pastor like that. I've always wanted to be like him, just like my grandfather, Reverend C.L. West, the founder of Metropolitan Baptist Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, northeast Tulsa. And then there's Deacon Hinton and Sarah Ray, my vacation Bible school and Sunday school teacher. See, I was shaped in a ghetto, but like Donny Hathaway and Leon Hudson in this song, The Ghetto, remind us. The ghetto in those days was full of deep bonds of empathy, deep connections of sympathy. The love was just flowing all over. Mr. Peters, my Little League coach. We had black fathers who built a Little League diamond and had minor league games and major league games every week with all the practices, so that the family structure, the communal structure was very, very tight. We had the musicians, and the music, of course, is always at the center of so much of black life. It's at the center of my life, at the center of Shiloh. And, of course, I'm a hang loose Baptist, so I was at the nightclubs and slow dancing under the purple lights to the Mighty Dells and the Whispers and Stylistics and Blue Magic and others, right? But that was what my life was. That's the bosom from which I emerged, and it was a love nest. It really was. It wasn't perfect, of course, because you always had human beings, and with human beings you always have tensions and conflicts. But the overriding reality, the overriding experience was one of a very deep, deep love. And I'll never, ever be able to return the debts or return that kind of love to those who loved me so. And so I was a love child, very much so. Now, even given that, I was out of control. See, I got kicked out of school in 3rd grade. No school would take me. You see what I mean? And so I ended up going to another grade, and then I skipped a grade at that time, and I ended up Wilsey Wood Junior High, and we shifted over to South Sacramento when I was 15. Last 3 years of my schooling from K to high school was in South Sacramento, so I went to Kennedy High rather than
Okay.
Hiram Johnson. My brother had gone to Hiram Johnson for a while, and he came over to
Yes.
Kennedy. So you know
I'm
that
familiar.
Sacramento
Yeah.
dynamic. We ran cross country track against you all night.
Okay.
Oh yeah, North Sacramento up in Roseville.
Yeah.
We had some wonderful track meets. But you see that my pilgrimage, my journey, my trajectory has just been beyond blessed. In such a cold and cruel world, I've had the human gifts and the divine gifts of love that I could never, ever, return, as I said before. That's why piety means much to me. Piety for me is the acknowledgement of the sources of good in one's life from your mama's womb to tomb. And those gifts, I mean, it's like Ella and Al and others. You know what I mean? We don't have a language for it.
Yes.
Really, that love cuts so deep. It's so real, so concrete, and yet they were trying to fortify us for a world that can be so wretched at times. Wonderful too, but wretched at times. Just like human beings, wretched and wonderful, sinful and subject to magnificent transformation and even conversion.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And similar to you, I feel like I can never pay my parents back
Exactly.
for
Exactly.
for all of their love, all of their support, and they still love me and support me in so many different ways. I'm where I'm at today because of my parents. So I understand what you said about your own parents and never being able to repay them for all that they did.
You and Mom graduated from the same institution for college. 1964, Mom came out. At that time, it was Sacramento State College. It's now California State University.
Yes,
Is that right? Same institution. Isn't that a beautiful thing?
It is a beautiful thing. I think that's a great institution. I enjoyed going there.
It is. It's a grand institution. Very much
Yes.
so.
Thank you. Very good information. I always like getting to, know all my speakers even more on a deeper level. And I just love the way you talk, too. It's very poetic.
That's kind of.
Well, let's talk about your schooling experience in a little more detail. You talked about getting kicked out of school, getting expelled from school when you were really young. And so I do want you to tell the audience about your journey in school, particularly during your childhood. So for me, when I think of the research that I engage in as an educator, not only do I focus on how factors outside of the schoolhouse impact students' development and different aspects of their development, but I focus on what happens within the school context. So I'm definitely interested in learning a little bit more about your relationship with your teachers. How were you as a student, Dr. West? And when did you really start pursuing your interest in philosophy?
Ooh, it's a wonderful question because, see, my mother's first grade teacher, she's the first black first grade teacher in Elk Grove. Elk Grove was a vanilla neighborhood right next to ours. We couldn't really go over there socially, but she took a chance as a first grade teacher. And over time, she was actually embraced, became first black principal.
Oh, wow.
And there's an elementary school now named after her in Elk Grove called Irene B. West Elementary School.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that a beautiful thing?
Yes.
So that Mom was always reading poetry to us, and we gained from her, inherited from her, a love of language, a love of literacy, and a love of reading. So I was reading all the time. There was a bookmobile that they used to have that came out to the black folk, and I would try to read every book in that bookmobile. But I still had a lot of rage, and I still do have a lot of rage. I try to channel it into righteous indignation rather than just a deep sense of anger and revenge. But there was no doubt that when I was young, I had a Robin Hood sensibility, so that the folk who I thought had something and maybe had a little bit too much, and Sister Linda, Brother Starvell, and them didn't have nothing, I would take a little bit from the folk who had and give it to Starvell and Linda and the others to make sure they had enough for lunch. And if somebody else had a, Babe Ruth or a Sugar Daddy or something waving, I said, no, you got to share that. And I was wrong. I was coercive, but I just trying to be egalitarian.
Yeah.
I was trying to be egalitarian. I couldn't stand the fact that people just didn't have hardly anything, and somebody else had a little bit more. Now all of us were broke as the Ten Commandments financially, because Glen Elder is a working class neighborhood,
Okay.
and so nobody was well to do at all. But I got it in fights all the time, and I was then called Little Ronnie rather than Cornel, so that people say Little Ronnie's coming, they say, oh Lord, here come another fight. Here come another gangster encounter. And that was, unfortunately, my reputation for a while. That's why I often say I was a gangster before I met Jesus, and now I'm a redeemed sinner with gangster proclivities. I still try to work it out, but I try to tie it to a love and tie it to a justice and tie it to a righteous indignation. But the rage is still inside of me. There's no doubt about it.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about that rage?
Where it came from and so forth.
Yes.
That was a good question. See, I got kicked out of school because I refused to salute the flag. We used to go down to Texas and Oklahoma every year, and I found out one of my great uncles had been lynched with his military uniform on. Yeah, so that my association with the flag when I was young had to do with what I found out in Texas. So I can understand people who have different perceptions of the flag. If you associate that flag with a loved one who died, my God, of course that flag is powerful and speaks to you at a deep level. But my first major association of it was with lynching. And so there's something I had no patience for, no acceptance of.
Yeah.
And as I got older and began to recognize just how much hatred, greed, envy, resentment, domination, subjugation, exploitation was in the world and in human history, I became full of even more rage. I really, and that continues to this day. I just can't stand injustice.
I'm with you.
You know what I mean?
Either.
It's just exactly, if I don't say or do something about it, the rocks are going to shout out. Now, part of that really, for me, at the deepest level, has to do with what it means to be a fallible, finite, fallen follower of Jesus of Nazareth. When he ran out those money changers with a righteous indignation in the temple, which is the largest edifice on the east side of Rome, and 400 Roman troops were protecting that temple, and he went in anyway. His disciples got scared and pulled back. And next thing you know, he's taking him to a cross because he's not hating rich people. Oh, no. He's not hating anybody. He's hating greed. He's hating indifference. He's hating callousness toward the vulnerable, toward the fatherless and motherless and poor and persecuted and so forth, you see. That resonated very, very deeply with me. It really did. And then Mom and Dad took me and Cliff to see Martin Luther King Jr. I was 10 years old. Memorial Auditorium, Sacramento. Okay. Brother Martin came through. And I don't remember too many of the words, but one of the things I remember about Brother Martin was he was for real. He was the real thing. He spoke from his heart, his soul, and he was willing to say what he meant and meant what he said and put his body on the line. That's what love really, really is.
Absolutely.
And that's what Mom and Dad did in their own way. Reverend Cook did in his own way. And others. I mean, Martin's not the only. Fannie Lou Hamer did it, and Ella Baker did it. Malcolm X did it in his own way. It took Malcolm a while to actually love vanilla brothers and sisters, but he got there. But he loved black folk so profoundly, and I think we ought to love everybody. But it's a good thing to love somebody. There's no doubt about it. You know, it's
Absolutely.
probably the greatest love warrior in sound of his generation is Stevie Wonder. He usually ends every concert. He says, "Well, I hope you find it in your heart to love somebody, and find it deep enough in your heart to love everybody." Then he walks home. See, that's Stevie. He got that from Lula May. He got that from Whitestone Baptist in Detroit. You see. And he's just a genius. I mean, he's just artistic, musical genius.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes, he is.
But he's part of the same tradition of you and I and Ella and Al and Irene and Clifton, which is a tradition of black people who have been hated so chronically for 400 years and keep dishing out love warriors every generation. That's a spiritual, moral level of excellence and achievement that goes hand in hand with education, because education in the end is about a love of knowledge, love of wisdom, love of learning, love of language, love of truth, love of beauty, love of goodness. And then for those of us, still religious, love of the holy, love of God.
Everything that you said totally resonates with me. I really appreciate what you just said. And, I want to ask you, when were you saved?
Well, I got baptized when I was 7 and a half. 7 and a half, indeed. Yes, indeed. My brother and I joined church Christmas, 1960. We got baptized in Shiloh Baptist. They baptized the first Sunday of every month. Yours may have done that in your first Baptist church, too. But it was January 1961, so it's been now 62 years that I went down into the water and came out a transformed human being, trying to make sure that I can shift the hatred to love and the revenge to justice, and the humility tied to a tenacity to be a force for good, in the language of the great John Coltrane. I mean, his love supreme comes right out of the same tradition that we're talking about. And I intend to be faithful unto death. It's a beautiful way of being in the world, but not of the world.
I think so, too. My dad, he's a minister. I mentioned that to you. And he baptized me. Yeah, he baptized me and
your own
my
father.
siblings. When we were really young, I remember being baptized. And, I grew up in a devout Christian household. So I understand what you're saying about having this deep feeling of love, not only for my own people, but for everyone.
Yes.
And really using that love to fight injustice, to educate others, and just to always come from a place of love in all that I do. And it is interesting being out in the world and seeing people who you just know they're not coming from a place of love. But I know that with the work that we both do, I think it's evident in everything that we do, to be honest with you.
I think you're right about that. I think you're right about that. Yeah. But at the same time, one of the highest forms of giving is forgiving. And so even folk who fall radically short, you can have a kind of revolutionary, love-driven patience that gives them time to undergo change and transformation, so we never give up on anybody.
I agree.
That everybody can go another way, can choose differently. And that's a beautiful thing as well. It's just that sometimes the waiting can be tough. And sometimes folk coming at you tooth and nail, and you have to make sure that you're able to preserve your own dignity.
Absolutely. Well, I have another question for you, Dr. West.
Sure.
I want to talk about your college experience and also your experience being a professor. So my question is, can you tell the audience about your experience studying at both Harvard and Princeton, and also returning to both institutions to teach and to pursue your scholarly activities. And I do want to note, Dr. West, that I did read your resignation letter from Harvard, the one that you made public for everyone, and I was hoping you could speak to that as well.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Yeah, Mom and Dad put me on a plane in September 1970. I arrived at Harvard, and I had the time of my life. I tell you, yeah. My dear brother Robert Gerard, Paul Nichols, Lenny Wallace. We had such a good time. I had magnificent teachers, Martin Kilson and Preston Williams and John Rawls and Hillary Putnam, Stanley Cavell, and Roger Firth. I mean, it was a magnificent time. I immediately joined with the Black Panther Party breakfast program, so I taught the young brothers and sisters in the morning while we gave them French toast, and I was also part of the Black Panther Party prison program. So I would go out to Norfolk, where Malcolm X was once imprisoned, and see the brothers after church on Sunday. I was actually even the Sunday school superintendent of Mount Pleasant Baptist Church under Boydkin Sanders for a while, and we had some powerful educational materials in that church, a lot of liberation theology, God tied to the plight of oppressed people and what have you. The Black Panther Party was always hard on my Christianity, but I worked closely. I never became a member, but I worked very closely with them because they had such a genuine concern for poor people, oppressed people around the world, but especially beginning at home with black folk. So that was part of my college experience, to always be multi-contextual, not confined just to the context of college, but have other contexts, be it prison, be it with the children, be it with music. I mean, Al Green and the others come to town, the jazz workshop of Paul's Mall. We never missed them, ever. I can tell you that. Absolutely. And then, went on to Princeton Graduate School in philosophy. And you're right, I ended up at Union Seminary at Yale, and then ended up at Princeton and Harvard. And it was wonderful to return. But see, my calling has always been the same, from very, very young. Trying to be force for good, trying to tell the truth, and trying to seek justice and be willing to pay whatever consequences flow from being true to one's calling. And again, it's a calling not of self-righteousness, because there's a self-critical element that's always a part of one's life, so you can grow and develop and mature. But all of the attacks and assaults could never dampen the fire that the Lord put inside me.
Yes.
Never ever.
And you mentioned consequences, right?
Yes,
There
yes.
are a lot of consequences I have found in this society when you speak out and
Absolutely.
when you are speaking out against injustice.
Absolutely.
And you can see that backlash in your community. You can see that backlash at your place of work, just in a lot of different areas in your life. How do you handle that?
Well, you're just ever ready. You're ever ready, because when you're living in the world but not of the world, it means that you're going to have a lot of foes, a lot of enemies. And they're still human beings, so you don't demonize them, but that some of them out to crush you. There's no doubt about it. Anytime I'm down and out, I think of Brother Martin King. He was in the paddy wagon for 4.5 hours from going to Reedsville Prison from Atlanta to way out in the country of Georgia, almost near where your precious sister lives now in Georgia. He was in the dark, a German Shepherd. Daddy King, his father, told me, he said, Brother West, when my son got out of that paddy wagon, he said, he could hardly walk a straight line. And all he could say is, "This is the cross we must bear for the freedom of our people." Mm-hmm. Now that's a extreme consequence. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So the things that you and I deal with in terms of being maybe lied on, character assassination, misunderstood, misconstrued, that's a little different than Martin. And of course, he hadn't even yet been murdered yet. He hadn't been murdered yet, but he was willing to bear that cross. Mm-hmm. And we used to sing a song in Shiloh, "Must Jesus bear the cross alone and all the world go free?" No, there's a cross for everyone. There's a cross for me. When you deny yourself, pick up your cross. The cross is not something you talk about. It's something you bear. And it's not just something you bear, but it might be something you die on. Mm-hmm. And you have to be willing to pay whatever cost it takes to be true to your calling. And that's the only way, in fact, that you and I have been able to flower and flourish. The people who came before, the Harriet Tubmans and Frederick Douglasses and Ida B. Wells Barnett's and A. Frank Philip Randolphs and Marcus Garveys, and let alone the people we know in our communities. Mm-hmm. They paid a major, major cost. Mm-hmm. I'm sure we could have stories from Ella and Al of their parents and grandparents, yes, the cross that they bore, mm-hmm, and yet they passed that love on. And now look at Professor Aletha herself, strong as ever. It's a beautiful tradition, but it's always, yes, a bloodstained banner. Mm-hmm. It's always bloodstained because that's the kind of world we live in. Mm-hmm. And so when I left Harvard, for example, that had to do very much. I was convinced with the Palestinian issue. I was a faculty advisor to the Palestinian students. There was no other faculty member that was open to being the faculty advisor to the Palestinian students. So they asked me. I said, "Of course, yeah. My God, my God." And it's very difficult to have a profound commitment to precious Palestinian brothers and sisters without bearing a major cost. That's not just now, but that was a number of years ago as well. I mean, Edward Said, one of the greatest public intellectuals in the history of America, is a Palestinian intellectual. He and I were close brothers. We traveled the country together. We had teach-ins and so forth. This is back in the early 80s. Because his text, Orientalism, came out in 1978. Okay. Question of Palestine, 1979. Covering Islam right after in 81, the trilogy that he wrote. And it was very clear that you got to pay a cost. And the same would be true. You pay a cost for being in solidarity with Jews in the 1940s. Mm-hmm. Oh, Lord. The United States is turning the boats of Jews around. Wouldn't even let them in. Mm. That's Roosevelt. Wouldn't even let them in. And the vicious attacks of the Nazis on our precious Jewish brothers and sisters. They felt like they were in the world all by themselves. Who's standing up for them? Well, anybody who's got a moral compass takes a stand. And that's right. These days it happens to be, in so many instances, our precious Palestinian brothers and sisters in Gaza. And I'm against the killing of any innocent people. So I do resonate deeply with my Jewish brothers and sisters dealing with 1,400 or 1,200 people who were killed and murdered. Those to me are war crimes. I don't in any way celebrate that. But when you also come back then with 12,000 Palestinians now, almost 5,000 precious children, it's genocidal assaults. Mm. And then you invoke the Amalekites from Hebrew Scripture. Those are the ones you're meeting. Remember when the Israelites were on their way in the Exodus, and what do? They kill every child and woman and man of the Amalekites because they were attacking the Israelites. And you say, that's genocidal intent, you see. And we got to be against genocide of anybody, of Armenians, of Jews, genocide in Rwanda, the genocide. There's too many instances of genocide in the Congo and so forth, but we have to have a moral sensitivity and a moral courage that leads us to have deep solidarity with anybody who's being attacked, assaulted, especially who are innocent, especially who are children. You know the song we sing in Shiloh? Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, red and yellow, black or white. They are precious in His sight. You all sing that song?
I remember that song.
You remember that song?
I remember it.
And you know that's not just a song now. No, that's a life to live. Every child, black child, white child, indigenous people child, Guatemalan, Ethiopian, Jewish, Palestinian, Arab, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, whatever child. That's what the cross is about. These days, you see, in the modern world, too many people wave the flag. So they're only concerned about the children under their flag. So you hear the discourses these days. Well, we're only concerned about American children because we're American. I'm only concerned about Israeli children because I'm Israeli. I'm only concerned about Palestinian children because I'm Palestinian. No, 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 no. Put that flag under the cross, and that cross is not just a theological symbol, but it could be understood with our secular brothers and sisters who are atheists and agnostics. It signifies unarmed truth and unconditional love. Those are values that an atheist can accept, that an agnostic can accept. But those are the standards, and every nation is under truth and love. Everyone. And so we got to get beyond this kind of very narrow nationalism and become internationalists and universalists. And I learned that in the West household. I learned it in Shiloh. I saw it in Martin Luther King Jr.'s example, Fannie Lou Hamer's and others. You can hear it in John Coltrane's Love Supreme. You can hear it when Aretha sings Respect. She's talking about everybody. James Baldwin's essays, Love So. Toni Morrison's Beloved, full of love, even when it's complicated, you know. You say, ooh, how do you keep that tradition alive? Because it's a flickering candle in the darkness of a world that is so obsessed with dehumanizing people. And that's a human thing. You see it in every community, every continent, every country. I'm sorry to go on so long, my dear sister.
I was mesmerized listening to everything that you were saying, and I agree with you. There's so much dehumanization going on right now, and it's been going on for a long time, of course,
That's right.
all over the world. And again, we do need to be coming from this place of love and loving everybody and caring about the plight of all people and what's going on around the world, and not just focusing on what's happening in our particular communities. We have to care about what's happening outside of those communities as well.
Absolutely. So very, very true. I mean, the thing we have to avoid is loving everybody but one's own family and one's own community. See, and this is one of the effects of the vicious legacy of white supremacy. You see that you can be a black person who is easily accepted by a white mainstream. If you distance yourself from black folk or the black community, you end up loving everybody but black people as a black person. You say, wait, this is a Keith Sweat moment. Something just ain't right. What is going on here? You got to love everybody, beginning with mom, dad, granddad, grandma, community, whatever it is, church, mosque. It could be synagogue, got a whole rich tradition of black Jews. It could be Hindus, Great Bell Hooks, my dear sister who was a black Hindu. A Buddhist. I'm sorry, a black Buddhist. It could be a black Hindu who follows Gandhi, you know. But when we say everybody, it doesn't mean that you are somehow subtracting where you come from and then loving everybody else. See, that's pathological.
Absolutely.
It really is.
And we see that quite a bit.
And we see it, that's exactly right, because the demands for black success in a white supremacist world too often is distance yourself, sever yourself from black folk who are speaking painful truths about the larger society. Larger society doesn't want to hear it. If you push yourself away from those persons speaking those painful truths, then you become the more sanitized and sterilized and deodorized black folk that the mainstream can embrace. You say, ooh,
Right.
something ain't right.
And at the end of the day, the question is, does the mainstream really embrace those particular
that's
individuals,
a wonderful
right?
question. That's a wonderful. They tend to embrace the black acceptance of the white mainstream rather than the black persons themselves. Because the moment those same black folk say something deeply critical, they get marginalized too. That's true. Very, very much so.
It is nice when we can all support one another, within our own communities and of course outside of our communities. But in thinking of what you're saying about black people and black communities, if, as we are engaging in black excellence and moving forward and achieving so much, I agree with you. We can still give back and we can still support our brothers and sisters in a variety of different ways.
Absolutely.
Instead of separating ourselves from them in such a way where, like you said, there are people who are trying to be accepted by others outside of their communities. And I don't know how well that always works out for people.
But it's always a challenge, though. Malcolm X used to say, I don't really want respect of the mainstream if they're thoroughly disrespecting the brother and sister on the block. And I think he's right about that. I think he's right about that.
Yeah.
If black middle-class people think that the mainstream can trash Precious Jamal and Letitia in the hood, but fully embrace them in the vanilla suburb, then that's a self-delusion. Because what's being embraced again is the acquiescence and the acceptance rather than the full person. You see? And if Jamal and Letitia are being respected as human beings, there's a good chance that Cornel and Aletha can be accepted as professors.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that's why we remain in. And that means, of course, telling the truth, not just to power, not just to the status quo, but we tell the truth to the relatively powerless. You see, poor people, black people, working people, women, gay brothers, lesbian sisters, anybody who's getting trashed, they need to hear the truth too, because there's white supremacy in black people's souls. There's male supremacy in women's souls. That's what it is to live in a deeply racist and sexist society, you see. There's a whole host of things inside of all of us that get in the way because we're all human beings.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, in the end, all of us need the truth. Now, one could argue, this is what we learn from the artists who are the vanguard of the species. I think musicians really the vanguard of the species as a whole, is that you can't be a great musician and find your voice, which is the anthem of black people. Lift every voice, not echo.
Right.
That you can't find your voice unless you tell the truth about yourself. And that's a difficult thing. So you got some people who could speak truth to power but can't speak the truth to themselves. Isn't that something? So they strong publicly, but privately and psychically, they still cowards. Isn't that complicated?
That is complicated.
That's a complicated thing.
And cowards in what way?
Because if you can't speak the truth to yourself, it means that you're using your activism as a form of escapism of yourself. And escapism is always an immature mode of being in the world.
Yeah.
You see? So that when you speak the truth to yourself, you recognize, as William Butler Yeats used to put it, it takes more courage to dig deep into the dark side of your own soul than it does for a soldier to fight on the battlefield. That's our Irish brother. He was a kind of blues man, just like Samuel Beckett and Eugene O'Neill. The Irish have a blues sensibility dealing with catastrophe and understanding there's a catastrophe of the self that needs to be wrestled with. And it's also deeply Christian. You see it in the great African theologian St. Augustine in his great Confessions. I'm going to tell the truth about myself. Ooh, that's a tough thing, baby. Kendrick Lamar, coming right out of here, Compton. He's a genius of his generation. Kendrick be telling the truth about himself. I'm telling you. And he's wrestling with his own inner demons. Tupac was the same way. And that's a sign of maturity. We all have to come to terms with our fears, insecurities, and anxieties inside of us. Then we can speak the truth to power. Then we can speak the truth to the relatively powerless. And what that does is it frees you up. You become as free as Muhammad Ali or Moms Mabley or Dick Gregory or Malcolm X. That's freedom right there.
That is freedom.
Those some free folk. We don't always agree with them, but they're free as it can be. Definitely. And myself as a Christian, Christians ought to be free. There's no room for cowardliness in Christian life.
It's very true.
You got to be courageous.
And like you said, I do think that there are people who are afraid to do the inner work. Right? They're afraid to do that inner work and to look within themselves and, like you said, to really face their own demons, to address their own issues. But they can go out and talk to everybody else about what's happening, but they won't look within. And so you're right. If we can start really looking within and addressing our own issues and facing our own truths and owning those truths, right, then, like you said, we can move more freely in the world. And I think that is a great place to be. I know for me, I'm always engaged in inner work.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, the last thing you want to be is somebody who's got a sophisticated analysis of domination, who can speak powerfully in public, but can hardly say hello to a brother and sister on the block when they smile and say hello. You know what I mean? Something wrong.
There's something very wrong with that, Dr. West.
It really is.
Yes,
it is.
I agree.
You say hello and get much like the brothers right downstairs at the barber shop that I spent time with. I mean, they just feed my soul, just spending time with them and talking and grinning and hugging and things, because they are the very folk you're willing to live and die for. They're the very folk you're concerned about. And they're the very folk that keep feeding you and fueling your fire and spirit in such a way that you can be a stronger force for good.
That's very true.
Isn't that the truth? It's
That's very
I
true.
learned that in Vacation Bible School. Sarah Ray used to tell us, if the kingdom of God is within you, then everywhere you go, you ought to leave a little heaven behind. And you can't leave heaven behind by being cold and callous to people. You just can't.
I agree with you.
Definitely.
I totally agree with you. I really, there's a part of me that wants to stay on this topic because I feel like there is so much to discuss.
I appreciate
There
you,
really
my
is.
sister. I appreciate
But we can talk more on this. But I want to kind of turn the audience's attention to talking about the intersection of your scholarship with your political activism. As I had mentioned at the beginning of this session, you do have a lot of highly popular books, such as Race Matters and Democracy Matters. And so I would love for you to talk more to the audience about how the writings in these books have aligned with your political activity over the years.
You know, for me, it comes down to sharing. That I think serving and sharing are inseparable. I'm first and foremost, I think, one tied to both life of the mind, life of spirit, and life of political struggle, all three simultaneously.
Okay.
And that's been true ever since, I arrived as a freshman in college, really. That the activism was always hand in hand with reading in the library and writing essays and books and so forth. And as you know, I made 3 albums, spoken word albums with Prince and Andre 3000 and Jill Scott, because a danceable education, a danceable education is as important as any other kind of education. Really, it's a matter of sharing, communicating with people, and that's one of the ways in which you gain a certain energy and vitality is being connected to others in a variety of different
I agree.
venues and so forth. Really, and so in that sense, I just love to read and write, and I wish I could sing like Luther Vandross, but I can't. So I hold off on that. Definitely. But they've been so inseparable. And I'm not saying everybody needs to do that. See, everybody's who they are, not somebody else.
That's true.
And that's very important. Some people are introverted. They don't like public life that much. That's fine. We understand that. They can go inside and do magnificent things. Some people just love to write
Yes.
great novels like Toni Morrison. She didn't need to be out in the street with Fannie Lou Hamer.
Right.
She was there in spirit. Write those magnificent novels that the world has to come to terms with. They're on a continuum. Fannie Lou and Toni.
Yes.
Very much so. Or Lorraine Hansberry and Ella Baker or anybody. There's a lot of different kind of callings, different kind of people in the world. And I believe that each and every calling has the same status. Really. So if you're working with the precious homeless day in and day out and touching their lives in a powerful way, that is as magnificent as somebody's talking on television trying to tell the truth.
I agree.
It's just a shift in context, but the calling is the same. The service, the quality of the service that, as you say, leads with love, is tied to compassion,
Yes.
and you're trying to touch somebody's life. You as a professor and a student so blessed to be in your class, you unsettle their minds, you touch their souls and say, ooh, that Professor Harven, she helped turn my life around. You don't say. That's what global educators do. That's what high quality educators do. And we've had teachers to do that in our lives.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely.
Yes. Who was your major influence, you think, as a teacher outside of mom and dad?
Well, you know what? I was about to say mom and dad because
I know.
because both my parents are educators. So so when I was a child, I would go to school, and I always did school well because I would come home and my mom would have lesson plans for my siblings and I at home. And similar to what you were saying about like reading lots of books, we would always be reading. I had a library in my house, and so we would always write with both my parents, my siblings and I. My dad, he writes poetry, and so, to me, my parents, they are my best teachers ever.
That's right. How blessed you are.
Yes, absolutely. And in thinking about the schoolhouse, my schooling, there are certain mentors that I can definitely think of at both Sacramento State University. One of my mentors, she passed away several years ago, and she was absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. And she was the one who turned me on to research because I took a class with her, and she had a lot of female scholars that she was introducing the class to. And I said, wow, this is so great to see women conducting research. This is amazing, because a lot of the images that I would always see were of white men in lab coats. And
absolutely.
And of course, it's like I knew women were conducting research, but it was really great to have a lot of our readings be readings by female scholars. And so I really just started getting into a lot of the research that female scholars were conducting, and it just kind of went from there. And then also at UCLA.
What was her name?
Dr. Karen Harven.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah, she was amazing, absolutely amazing. And then at UCLA, I went to UCLA for my Ph.D. So during that program, I had amazing mentors as well. So Dr. Sandra Graham, Dr. Tyrone Howard. Just lots of amazing, wonderful mentors in the Graduate School of Education. I can name so many different scholars.
That's one of the best in the country.
Yes, it is. I am a
Indeed.
Bruin for life. I'm also a Hornet, Sac
Oh,
State.
no, we got Hornet and the Bruins. There you go.
Yes.
Go, 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 go,
No.
go, go.
Yes. So yes, there are certain teachers and certain mentors who I have had throughout the years and throughout my schooling, but it all really started with my mom and dad.
That's beautiful.
I feel like they're my greatest teachers.
So you and I are very similar in that regard.
Yeah.
Very blessed in that regard.
Very blessed, I agree. Okay, so I want to talk about your presidential bid. You are running for president of the United States, and you are running as an independent. And I want to ask, what made you run for president at this time in your life? Why now? And why as an independent? And the reason I'm asking about your designation as being an independent is because sometimes I'll hear people say, you know, when people run as an independent, they're taking away the swing votes, they're taking away critical votes from candidates who are Republican or candidates who are Democrat. But I think that we should start looking at candidates who are running as independents.
Well, appreciate that question. No, for me,
Yeah.
really, I've been running for truth and justice all my life, and it's inseparable from running for Jesus. But most importantly, it's a matter of trying to keep alive the best of any democratic experiment, which is the empowerment of those Sly Stone call everyday people, or James Cleveland called ordinary people. So I'm looking at the world through the lens of the cross. I'm looking at the world through the lens of the plight and predicament of those Frantz Fanon called the wretched of the earth. So running for president is really just another context for doing the same thing I've been doing all my life. When I looked at the presidential candidates and I said, my God, we've got all of these intelligent, courageous fellow citizens. How do we end up with these mediocre so-and-sos running for president? It's just unbelievable. So I look over the Republican Party and you say, oh, my God, you got Trump leading the country towards Civil War #2. I look at the Democrats, oh, you got Biden heading toward World War III, militarism abroad, with Russia, China, the Middle East. There's got to be some voices that try to keep alive the legacies of the Martin Kings and Rabbi Heschels and Edward Zaids and Dorothy Days. And so I thought it would be very important for me to do what I've always been doing all my life, but now to move into a different context, which is the context of electoral politics. Now, that's a different context, because so much of American politics is legalized bribery and normalized corruption. Where's public? Where's public life? Where's commitment to public service? Where's a commitment to the least of these? Those mass incarcerated, those in hoods and barrios and reservations. 62% of our fellow citizens live from paycheck to paycheck. Yeah. And yet, for the most part, when you look at mass media, you see the lives of the rich and the famous and the celebrities and so forth and so on. Just wait, they're human beings. Okay, there's a whole lot of human beings down here who are catching hell of all colors, all regions, all religions, and non-religions.
Catching hell.
And so it's just a matter of trying to raise my voice in that context of electoral politics so that, you know, I have policies. I'm an abolitionist about poverty. I want to abolish poverty. We could have abolished poverty a long time ago. But the billions and billions of dollars we spend on wars, the billions and billions of dollars of profits on Wall Street, and both parties are parties of war and Wall Street, of war and Silicon Valley, of war and the 1% that own over 90% of the wealth of three individuals who have wealth equivalent to 50% of fellow citizens. 160 million citizens have wealth equivalent to three people. Wow. Now, that's an extreme wealth inequality that I think is spiritually obscene. It really is. It's, well, they worked hard, they're smart and so forth. There's a whole lot of everyday people who are very smart, highly intelligent, willing to work hard. They just don't have the opportunity.
Yes.
And so we have a system. It's not just here, but it's around the world where we have this tremendous gap between the poor and working classes and the well-to-do. And so when Martin King said, well, it's poverty, it's racism, it's materialism, and it's militarism that's leading the country and the species to its destruction. That's what Martin said in 1967. Brother Martin's right. If we don't stop those four, we in a world of trouble. And by racism, he didn't mean just racism against black people, but the dehumanization of anybody, any slice of humanity. And that's what my campaign is. So in that sense, it's really a moment in a movement more than anything else, a moment in a tradition. And again, I intend to be faithful to it, to speak those truths and see. I mean, right now, Joe Biden may run out of gas. Trump may end up in jail. RFK Jr., I don't know what my brother RFK Jr. might end up doing, but you just don't know. Things are really changing so quickly.
They are.
And we shall see. I just want to be true to my calling.
Well, I think that you are bringing a fresh, balanced, and critical perspective to politics. And when I heard that you were running for president of the United States, I was really excited because you're a fellow scholar.
Ooh,
And
thank you,
I
thank
have been watching you all over the news, talking about your perceptions just on a lot of what's happening in the world. And I like how you're being highly critical of everybody. So I think that's really
And
important.
I think that's what one has to do. You know, when you see suffering in the Congo, suffering in Sudan, suffering in Kashmir, suffering wherever it is, south side of Chicago, suffering in Gaza, wherever it is, we have to raise our voices and be as morally consistent and still have the righteous indignation of what's coming at those suffering, struggling people, really, very much so.
I agree. Are there any other takeaways that you would like for people to consider in thinking about your platform, the goals and the issues that you are addressing?
Well, again, I just think we need to recognize that foreign policy is inseparable from domestic policy. We got some politicians who on a domestic front can say some nice things, but end up supporting militarism or end up supporting war crimes or crimes against humanity or even the crime of genocide. And we have to be critical of that. Some people say, well, I love this politician's policy when it comes to X at home. But what do you think about them when it comes to foreign policy? Oh, I can't stand it. That's the worst thing. Well, there's human beings over there. You see, the human beings in the Middle East or in Africa or in Latin America, they have the same value. Their babies have the same value as babies in America. That doesn't mean that we're anti-American. It just means that America is one nation among nations. It doesn't have to be an empire that other nations defer and only Americans have value or more value than non-Americans. You see, I don't accept that kind of thinking about what it means to be human. And in that sense, we need more voices. I'm not the only one, but we need more voices that are quite upfront about that. And it's difficult, especially in America, because you got polarization, you got repression, you got censorship, you can be canceled, you could be lied on, you could be in prison, you could be assassinated. There's a lot of different consequences that can flow. And so you got to check yourself and see what kind of consequences you're willing to deal with, you know,
Right.
very much so.
You know something, you mentioned being canceled, right?
Yeah.
And I have had different colleagues and friends and just different people approach me who say they want to speak out more against injustice and just what they're seeing happening in the world, but they are afraid to do so because they are afraid of being canceled. What do you say to those individuals who are
Well, I
afraid of
say
that.
it's understandable.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. All of us, choose life and or choose abundant life, and we don't want to be misunderstood, and we don't want to be canceled, taking away our livelihood, taking
Yeah.
away our positions, and so on. Yet at the same time, for me, it's a spiritual question. That see, I come from a tradition that says quite explicitly that it's better to be dead than be afraid and succumb fully to one's fear.
Yeah.
That's what Martin used to say. Mary Ellen Pleasant, the black sister who was the godmother of human rights in California, San Francisco, she used to say, "I'd rather be a corpse than a coward." I see that's a whole lot. Most people would have difficulty saying that.
Yeah.
But at least we know what the standards are. You know what I
Right.
mean? At least we know we say, okay, I don't
Right.
want to be a coward, but I
Yes.
might take a little cowardliness just not to be a corpse right away. We understand. You got
Right.
loved ones you want to be around and so forth. But we know what the standards are. That's very important. Because once the standards get lowered, then instead of moral and spiritual greatness, you get worldly success. And all of a sudden, worldly success is viewed as great.
Right.
That's not true.
And it's not.
Oh, no, not at all. Socrates, Jesus, Martin King, we can go on and on and on of those who were not worldly success in terms of money and status and position, but they used whatever success they had for moral and spiritual greatness. See? And that makes a big difference. And we pass that on to the younger generation. And, you are the future in that sense, that you are one of those love warriors, freedom fighters of the younger generation that recognize your connection to this great tradition in which morality and spirituality are looking for a place in a world of barbarity. Not just a moment of barbarity. That's Gaza. In a world of barbarity. Slavery was barbaric.
Yeah.
Jim Crow was barbaric. Psychic self-hatred is barbaric.
Yes.
We can go on and on and on, you see. That's so much of the world. But it's not the whole world. You see, when the old folks used to say that God's got the whole world in God's hands, they were saying, well, this devil, and it manifests in hatred and greed and fear and domination, appears very mighty, but they're not almighty. There's something left over.
Yes.
And what's left over is that love. What's left over is that justice. What's left over is that compassion.
That compassion.
Yes.
And just thinking of what you just said, this is why I spend a lot of time alone and in the company of other people who are like you and just other people who get it, because it's a lot nicer to be around people who are very spiritual and who are grounded in spirituality. Because you're right, I think that we all approach this world a little bit differently.
Oh, it's true. It's very true.
And when I think of the teachings of Christianity, we aren't supposed to be jealous of other people. We aren't supposed to be envious. We aren't supposed to even be fearful.
That's true.
We're supposed to be
afraid.
courageous.
Do
We're
not be
supposed,
afraid.
yeah,
That's
We're
right.
supposed to be brave
That's
because
right.
we have God on our side, right? We are not supposed to give in to selfishness and like you said, just a lot of really negative behavior. We're supposed to rise above that and be better than that.
Absolutely.
And that does take a lot of courage. It takes a lot of work.
And you need friends and family, community. You need structures and infrastructures that reinforce that.
Right.
Because all of us fail. We try again, fail better,
I
as
agree.
Samuel Beckett says. all of us fall on our faces, and the question is, what is the quality, scope, and breadth of our bounce back? Because we all got to be able to bounce back.
And bounce back quickly.
Bounce back. Well, the timing got to be in place. It's a
Okay,
jazz.
timing.
It's a
Timing.
jazz-like situation. You're right. You get that timing right with your bounce back. Very much so. But it's like Muhammad Ali's rope-a-dope. You remember when he used to fight James Foreman? Everybody say he just standing and waiting for him and just hit him. And Muhammad Ali thinking, I'm a jazz man. Watch the timing. As soon as he runs out of gas, I'm going to respond. Pow. Now, no, I shouldn't be talking about violence like that on the live stream in boxing. But Muhammad Ali had that timing right. And that's very important when you're on the battlefield, and we are on battlefields. Oh, we're on intellectual ones, we're on political ones, we're on spiritual ones, we're on social ones, and at times you're on military battlefields, in wars and so forth. Oh, yes, very much so.
Well, my last major question for you, Dr. West, it has to do with the current crisis in Gaza. What are your feelings regarding the current crisis that we're seeing unfold in Gaza? And I have had a lot of people ask me where you stand on it. And then also I want to bring up this notion of feeling helpless. There are a lot of people who've expressed to me that they feel really helpless, although there are many ways to contribute, right? In a positive way to what's happening by marching. I know there's a lot of rallies going on today. People are marching today. People can give money to different organizations. People can call their local congressperson. There's a lot that people can do, but there are people who are still feeling helpless, but want to do something. They want their voices to be heard as they call for a ceasefire.
Yes. Well, I think that despair and helplessness are kissing cousins.
Yeah.
And the despair and helplessness are signs that we're not numb. You see, the worst thing that could happen is when you see genocidal assaults on any people. If you don't feel something, if you're numb, then that's already a sign that you're spiritually bankrupt. You see. That's true for anybody. It could be attacks on Jews, it could be attacks on Palestinians, attacks on black folk, attacks on white folk, attacks on Russians, attacks on Ethiopians, attacks on Congolese and others. So that the helplessness in a certain sense is a moment that can move toward empowerment because you already have shattered the numbness and the callousness. Very important. Now, when it comes to the Gaza situation, the Middle East, it's a situation where you recognize. You see, on the one hand, you've got precious Jewish brothers and sisters who have been terrorized, traumatized, and hated for 2,000 years. So they have an underdog mentality. They have deep proclivities toward paranoia because for so often in their history, they felt as if they're all alone. And of course, the Holocaust and the Shoah under the gangsters, Nazis, and Hitler and so forth reinforced that. But they jump out of the burning buildings of Europe and they land in the Middle East. And first they lied to themselves and said, there's no people here, there's just land. That's not true. There were Arabs there and there were Jews, 70% Arabs, 30% Jews when they founded the state. See? So almost like the United States. Well, there's no people here, they're just buffaloes and Indians. Indians are human beings.
Yes.
Don't lie and say there's no people here. So then you have to decide. You can go with Albert Einstein, you can go with Judah Magnus, you can go with Hakaham and other Jewish thinkers, all the way up to Noam Chomsky, who say we got to coexist with the people who are already here. So the Arabs and the Jews must learn how to coexist as equals. Or you could follow Jabotinsky, who argued Jews must dominate and expel or even annihilate Arabs and Palestinians. Now, Netanyahu's father was an assistant to Jabotinsky. So that tradition is dominate, subjugate, even annihilate. You see. So you got this struggle that's been going on within Israel itself between Jewish voices, because no one community speaks in one voice.
Right.
No one community is monolithic or homogeneous.
Right.
So what do you have? Well, you end up with these precious Jewish brothers and sisters who have experience historically of being underdogs, now are tied to the top dog in the world, which is the United States, and its war machine, and its military, with its military aid, right? And so Israel ends up with the fourth biggest military in the world. Well, they got less than 10 million people. What's going on? Because, never again, they want to make sure Jewish safety, Jewish security is always procured. I resonate with that. Jewish security and Jewish safety is non-negotiable. There must be Jewish safety and Jewish security and Jewish dignity. The reality is you land on other people's land, you dominate, occupy, then create a siege, and when you are attacked, you respond with genocidal assault. Now, the attack, killing innocent people is wrong, no matter who they are, and I'm the first to acknowledge that, you see. But if you think that gives you license to kill as many people as you can, nearly 5,000 children in 2 months, and 12,000 in 2 months, the adults and women, I mean, men and women in addition to the children. And it's still going on, you see. And you think somehow that's going to secure Jewish safety? That's going to secure Jewish security? No. Palestinian safety and security and Jewish safety and security are all non-negotiables. The question is, how do you proceed when you're trying to affirm and procure each one of those? But, you know, we're in a world where zero-sum game. My life means your death. You see, your death means my life. It's not going to work. It's going to boomerang generation after generation after generation. And I think one of the great lessons of Martin King and others was what? What Emmett Till's mother said. What did she say in Chicago when her precious baby was in that coffin? Brought him back from the Tallahatchie River in the hateful Jim Crow, Mississippi. She stepped to that lectern in that Pentecostal church, Robert Church of God in Christ, and she said, "I don't have a minute to hate. I will pursue justice for the rest of my life." See, that's the language of a strong, visionary, courageous woman, black woman, human being, coming out of a great tradition of a great people. Hate us all you want. Terrorize us, traumatize us. We still gonna teach you something about love and healing and freedom, not because we're naive, but because we don't want to live in a world of nothing but vicious, ugly cycles of hatred and violence every generation. We love our children too much to have them create black versions of the Ku Klux Klan against the Ku Klux Klan coming at us. No, we refuse to create black versions of the Klan, but we resisted. We fought.
Yes.
We contested. We didn't give up. And that's a lesson for the world. And now that the whole world has the blues, you either learn something from a blues people coming out of Delta, Mississippi, or you lose your planet, you lose your democracy, and you lose your sense of morality and humanity. And this is not a function of skin pigmentation. There's a lot of black cowards and black thugs and black gangsters in the world who don't choose to be part of the legacy of Martin King. It's a matter of your spiritual formation, of your soul craft, of your moral courage, and your deep education, which is not just of mind, but of heart and soul and body and community. That's why we raise our voices.
Absolutely. And I've been seeing you on television marching. I saw you at a rally at UCLA, and then, of course, off of that campus too. You've been very active in wanting there to be a ceasefire.
Ceasefire, end the siege, end the occupation, and I want equal dignity
Yes.
for my precious Palestinians and precious Jews. I want equal rights. I want equal access to resources. Each Jewish life, each Jewish baby, each Palestinian life, each Palestinian baby have exactly the same status and significance.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate
But
your
thank
perspective.
you. This has been just so wonderful
Yes, it
dialogue
has.
with you.
So there are some questions,
That's wonderful.
audience
That's wonderful.
questions, and I would love to. Thank you so much.
Indeed, indeed.
I love it if you address some of these questions. There's a lot of questions that have come in. Okay, so let me see. All right, so here's a question for you. Dr. West, what are your motives to run for the 2024 presidential election? We've kind of covered that
Right.
already. And what are the changes? So maybe this is the question. What are the changes that need to be made in the U.S. from your perspective?
Well, the first thing we need to do is cut back on investment in military. We've got 800 military units around the world. We've got special operations over 100 countries. That's what it is to be an empire.
Okay.
And I've got an anti-imperialist sensibility. America does not need to be an empire. America needs to be a nation among nations. And therefore, if, given $1.2 trillion we invest every year, if we had a major disinvestment in military and invested it in jobs with a living wage, eliminating poverty, providing decent housing for people, providing free medical health care for people, and quality education, we'd be a very different kind of society. We don't need to have one precious brother, sister, or sibling homeless, not just here in Los Angeles, across the nation. We don't need to have one poor. We could have solved the issue of poverty a long time ago in terms of universal employment. Make sure people have access to a job with a living wage. It's just that our priorities are so warped. They're warped. And by warped, what I mean is we end up spending so much money for guns, cannons, submarines, missiles, and so little money for fulfilling the social needs of everyday people. So that's the overarching orientation.
Okay.
And it's just a Martin Luther King-like program. That's really all it is. Same tradition. You know what I mean? It's just spilling over into politics. That's all.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Okay. So here is another question. Although I did not grow up in the 60s and 70s, it seems the anti-war movement was strong and then disappeared. Would you please comment on whether you agree, and if so, what changed?
No, that person's absolutely right. Absolutely right. In the 1960s, we had a strong anti-war movement. And the black community was one of the strongest communities that was anti-war. But what happened was, one, that television, corporate media no longer allowed for the public to see the body of American soldiers when they came back. You see, in the 60s, every day, there's over 50,000 American soldiers who died in Vietnam. Every day, Walter Cronkite and others would show the bodies. But see, there was an agreement to never show the bodies in the 80s, 90s, and so forth. So there was wars taking place. U.S. soldiers were dying, but only the families got access to the bodies. So it could not be a public experience to really see what war does to people, you see. And secondly, what happened was that we began to believe that a war economy was a precondition for a good economy. So people were thinking, well, if we didn't invest in all of these wars, our economy would go bad. And because people believe, well, it's all about a good economy, then some of the preconditions of a good economy tied to a war economy is hard to call into question. Very difficult to call into question. And then even among our so-called liberal democratic presidents, you got 7 wars going on. They're dropping 26,000 bombs every year. And yet, invisible. Hardly talked about on TV. Hardly talked about. So it was difficult for the American people to really have a sense of the military print of the country around the world. Now, when it came to, Iraq, it became, inescapable. We know it was a lie. They know they rationalize it with a lie. And yet, how many Iraqis died? Nobody's ever said a word on U.S. television. Over 500,000 Iraqis died based on that lie. And an Iraqi life has the same value as any other life in the world. No talk about it at all. How many in Afghanistan? How many in Libya? No talk. So to keep it invisible, not allow the American people to have a sense of what's going on and what's being done in our name. Now, Gaza, it's impossible. It's on TV every day. It's those American bombs being used by the Israeli Defense Forces, you see. So now we've got a real possibility of another anti-war movement. And among the young people, of course, the Vietnam War had to do with draft, too.
Yes.
See, when the draft in place, all young people had to go, no matter who they are. Whereas now the voluntary army, anti-war movement can take off, but the college students don't have to worry about being drafted. So it doesn't affect them as personally as it did in the 60s. But I think the anti-war movement is going to escalate.
Okay.
And I think that's a very positive thing.
Like you said, especially with what we see is happening right now in the world.
Absolutely.
Here's another question for you, and it has to do with California's Central Valley. Blessings to you. This 2024 election is very pivotal here in California's Central Valley. We are the red island in California's blue sea of Democrats. As an organizer, I am interested in how to get congregations back involved as an institution. Do you have any thoughts on how to get them back involved for the ones who tend to stay away from politics?
No, it's a wonderful question.
Yeah, it is.
Wonderful question because, see, if there were a spiritual and moral awakening among congregations across the nation, we'd have a different kind of nation. So many of my fellow Christians support Trump. And, it's a sad thing to see fellow Christians supposedly so tied to morality and spirituality provide rationale for a gangster. I mean, Trump is not an exemplar of integrity, honesty, decency, and he is about as far removed from the example of Jesus as one could imagine. So I say to my fellow Christians, what kind of arguments do you have to support this particular candidate? And they say, well, God uses devils. Well, so how far is that theology going to take you? I mean, I've heard some, because I spend time with my conservative brothers and sisters, and if they're not a monolith either, they're not homogeneous. They've got a number of different voices and things. And they come back and they say, well, I can't really stand Trump that much, but I have a genuine hatred of Biden. So it's an anti-Biden vote. Just like so much of Biden supporters are really anti-Trump. They're not too crazy about Biden.
Okay.
But they're anti-Trump. And so you end up with these two figures. And those who follow them tend to be, many of whom are not crazy about either. And the Christian ones, my God, we need a major spiritual and moral renaissance in our churches. But that's a larger issue. But you could begin by just looking at the life of Martin Luther King Jr. just start.
I'm laughing at what you're saying not because it's like the content isn't funny, but like when you think about, like, I'm a fellow Christian, so I understand what you are saying. What's interesting is just yesterday I was talking to a fellow Christian, someone I know, an acquaintance, and we were talking about the upcoming election. And he said he is considering voting for Trump because, I mean, if Trump is really running, he's considering voting for him because he said, well, the last time Trump was in office, there was money in our pockets. Wow. That's what he said. And I said, maybe we should explore that a little bit more.
Isn't that the truth?
So, but I've heard a number of people say that, What are your thoughts on that?
You see, Hitler and Mussolini, two vicious gangsters and fascists, ran in part on a program to make sure the trains ran on time and make sure there was money in the pocket of their supporters. And they did that. So Hitler put money in the pocket of the Germans, and you ended up with a Holocaust for our precious Jewish brothers and sisters.
That's interesting,
Isn't
right?
that something?
That is something.
So if your only view of politics is just money in your pocket, then you would put up with genocide. You would put up with stop and frisk of police that's marginalized and dehumanizing so many young black and brown brothers and sisters. Yes. You would put up with extreme wealth inequality as long as some of that money is in your pocket. Oh, how narrow, how truncated, how parochial any kind of politics would be if it's solely and exclusively about, or even primarily about, just money in my pocket. See, so we got to understand what it is to be a citizen. We've got to have a moral and spiritual dimension to our understanding of what it is to be a citizen. If to be a citizen is just money in pocket, then that's just being a consumer and a money grabber. And if it's all just about money, somewhere I read the root of evil, the source of evil, fundamental pillar of evil is what the OJs call love of money. Money, 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 money. Money.
It is the root of evil.
Listen to little old Jays and gamble and huff, and then go read the Bible. Because that's the materialism that blinds us to moral and spiritual reality. Now, I do understand, folks, they should have money in their pocket.
Right.
I'm not against that, you see. But if all you're talking about is money and not morality, you're going to end up with an immoral regime that's dropping money in your pocket.
And I'm glad you brought up Hitler and tied that to how money was being put into the pockets of supporters. And so people turned a blind eye to genocide.
Absolutely.
I really hope that resonates with a lot of people in the audience, right? So I'm really glad you brought that point up. we have to have a moral compass at the end of the day. I absolutely agree with that.
That's exact. And we could bring it home. You know, you got a whole lot of Americans in the 1830s that just wanted money in their pocket. And when so much of that money was coming from cotton picked by my ancestors that went to Lancashire mills in Britain that produced the highest levels of wealth known to the modern world, but don't want to say a mumbling word about the barbarity of white supremacist slavery. The same would be true with Jim Crow, the neo-slavery that set in place 15 years after the end of slavery itself in America. Just put money in my pocket. I'm not going to say nothing about the lynching. I'm not going to say nothing about segregation. I'm not going to say nothing about apartheid-like realities in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Arkansas. No, I just want some money in my pocket. Oh, please. Please. What happens when the catastrophe comes to your house?
There we go.
Oh, then all of a sudden, people look at the world very different. That's what makes you think that when the catastrophe's on one side of town, that it's irrelevant. It becomes relevant only when it comes to your neighborhood. What happened to the golden rule? See, when you view life as a gold rush, you end up worshiping the golden calf. And the golden rule becomes he or she who has the gold rules. And if you don't have any gold, you still get crushed. But what happens when the crusher gets close to your house? See, that's the challenge here.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up that point because I think that's part of why I always speak up for a variety
Absolutely.
of different communities. Just, basically because if I see something happening over here to my brothers and sisters, what's to say it's not coming? Like the issues aren't coming to me next.
Exactly.
And so, I think it is important for us always to look out for one another.
Absolutely.
And to, again, speak out against the injustices that we are seeing around the world. And to not just be concerned with money. And yes, like you said, money is important. But if you're receiving money or your money's increasing and part of the contract is to turn a blind eye to injustice, that's really problematic.
That's very true. You want to be a person of integrity, honesty, and decency.
I agree.
To be
And
just
decency,
a decent person is to be concerned about other people. And that's other people across the board, But these days, just to opt for decency makes you a revolutionary.
Right?
Isn't that something?
It does.
It makes you a revolutionary. Oh, I see that you want to cut so radically against the grain just because I'm concerned about Jose and Juanita on the other side of town. I'm concerned about Paul McGillicuddy, Brother Rosenberg, Sister Farah, and Brother Muhammad. That makes me a revolutionary. My God, what a world. Well, in some ways, it's always been like that.
It has always been like that, I feel. Well, I think we have time for at least one more question.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Would you please explain how being a nationalist versus being an internationalist can hinder participation in global movements?
Yeah, I think that because nationalism is one of the most powerful forces, certainly the most powerful ideology in the modern world. You see, most people are willing to live and die for their flag. You think about that. Even race and gender and class. There's not a lot of people willing to die for class. The class internationalism that Marx envisioned is still very weak. As much as people talk about race and blackness and so forth, how many folk willing to die just for blackness? You got a few, but very small. You go to U.S. Army, you see all kind of black folk.
Yeah.
They willing to die for the flag. U.S. nationalism. The same is true with gender. How many willing to die just for gender? Well, you got a small slice of sisters of all colors, but most of the women lining up behind the flag. So nationalism is the most powerful force. So the question becomes then, we know that nationalism is there. What kind of moral and spiritual possibilities can nationalism unleash so that we end up embracing all of humanity? So you're not going to erase nationalism. You're going to use nationalism as a stepping stone to embracing all of humanity. That's what internationalism is, or universalism is, embracing everybody, not just those in this territory or that territory. And so we have to be jazz-like. Again, you got to be improvisational. You got to recognize you're not going to eliminate nationalism. It's been around for the last 200-some years. It cuts very deep, no matter what color, gender, class. People are willing to die for the flag. Why? They associate that flag with protection. Why people go to the army? To protect the nation, to protect the territory, to protect the people in the territory. Okay. Is that always the case? No. We've seen all kind of wars. They ain't got nothing to do with protecting Americans. It might protect corporate interests. It might protect certain kind of elite concerns, but it's not protecting the everyday American. But the basic argument is that the U.S. Army and the armed forces are there to protect us, and it's understandable. People need to be protected. They need to be recognized. They need to be have some sense of belonging, association with something bigger than them. But don't stop at the nation. It's a stepping stone to humanity. And that's where the universalism that can flow out of a particularism or internationalism can flow out of a nationalism plays a very important role.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful. And you're right, so many people get behind the flag. And that's fine. But you're right.
Absolutely.
We need to have a global perspective.
If that flag is not shutting down your morality and spirituality, if that flag is opening up your morality and spirituality to embrace people around the world, then that can be a wonderful thing. Very much so.
So I have a question for you. Where do you see our country going? I feel like we're definitely a work in progress, right?
Yeah, we're definitely a work in progress.
And I think we're always going to be a work in progress. But what's the vision?
Well, the vision is, no matter where we are, that we're going to be committed to truth and justice and compassion for all, and a belief that all human beings can change and be better, and all nations, all peoples can change and be better. We're not going to be naive, that we know how ugly and vicious and atrocious the world has been and is. We just won't allow that viciousness, atrociousness to have the last words. That in the end, we're going to opt for a love, a hope, a possibility, a faith, a compassion, a community that embraces each and every one of us. And it's always a slice of humanity that opts for that. It's a critical minority, as it were. We just want to be part of that cloud of witnesses.
Yes.
Of those that didn't give in, sell out, cave in, and become so callous in their hearts that they foreclosed any possibilities of a better world.
I really like that. I think it's a very admirable and beautiful vision.
But you part of it. You part of it. You living it. You living it, my dear sister. And it's a beautiful thing, very much so. But it has been an absolute joy to be in conversation with you.
I have really enjoyed being in conversation with you so much. I feel like there's so much more that we can discuss, but I know that we are out of time, and I just want to thank you again. I want to thank our audience members.
And
Yeah,
we
thank
salute
you.
our precious folk out there, and like what it is, kind of the landscape of the technology.
Yes.
We think, brothers, Brother
Yes,
Sunni, well, it's
absolutely.
wonderful work
Yes.
too.
Oh, yes.
Definitely.
But thank you again, everyone, and stay tuned. Uh, we've been recording this session, so I will post the recording online for you to view and to share with others. And I'll be in contact with everyone via email. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you, Dr.
Well, thank you,
West.
my dear sister, Professor Dr. Aletha.
Thank
Oh,
you.
man.
This is so
Thank you
good.
so much. Indeed, indeed.
I've enjoyed it.